Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You have written yet another book. And this book, many are saying once again, is one of the most painful examinations of a true story, illustrated and told in a fictitious way. The Nickel Boys is based on what some call the rehabilitory school. Some people just call the torture facility. It was the Dozier School. Why did you choose to tell the story the way you did? Because you have such a specific way of telling the story.
Yeah, it was based on the Dozier School, which was a reformed school in Florida, operated for 110 years. And the idea was very lofty. You know, instead of locking up kids with grown-up offenders, what if we give them teaching at school one day and work the next? They'll come out and be rehabilitated. But immediately, you know, 3 years into its being opened, there were kids as young as 6 being shackled, put in solitary confinement. Every 15 years, there'd be an expose and talk of reform, and nothing happened until it finally closed in 2011. And I was shocked when it hit the national media. They found unmarked graves, 65 unmarked graves, and they tried to reconstruct what happened. And it had been covered a lot in Florida, but not so much national media. Right. And I felt that if there's one place like this, how many other stories are we not hearing about?
It's interesting, yeah, and it's interesting that they, you know, the idea of the school seems like a great idea. You know, people go, as you said, it's a lofty ambition. We're going to go with reform. Let's not lock the kids up. Let's not put them in jail. Let's find a different way. But for all intents and purposes, this was almost worse than a prison.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of physical abuse, sexual abuse. In the unmarked graves, they dug up the bodies and found kids with shotgun pellets in their skeletons, blunt force trauma to their skulls. And so, you know, usually we have great ideas, and when people get involved, they turn to crap, unfortunately.
Right. You write the book from an interesting perspective because it's based on this school, but you're telling it through a very personal lens. There are 2 characters in the book who we're following the story through, and both of them are at the school, but both of them see the school through very different lenses. One sees the school as like oh, this is not going well, but you know, it's not the world, or it's not America as it's supposed to be. And another goes, no, this is exactly what America is all about. Why did you choose to tell the story in that way?
I could have said it in '85 and in 1924. I picked 1963 because it's the height of the civil rights movement.
Right.
And Elwood, our positive character, optimistic character, has seen advances in terms of social order and justice. But it's also the height of segregation, Jim Crow laws that restricted black life and movement in America. And so we had these 2 warring ideas of progressivism and entrenched injustice. And so Elwood thinks he can change the world. He's been inspired by Martin Luther King and the marches he's seen in his lifetime. And then there's Turner, who's an orphan, and he's always lived by his wits and doesn't think that people change or systems change.
Right.
I think, you know, I think they represent parts of me. I have an optimistic side and a pessimistic side, and are often at war with each other. And I think it's a fundamental sort of philosophical disagreement we all have.
When you write books like this, do you ever find yourself changing your mind as you're writing the book? Because although you're creating the story, I mean, there must be a part of you as a storyteller and as a story consumer that is also falling into the story. Like, do you write the book and then go, oh, I don't have hope for America, and then write another page and go, no, I'm very hopeful for...
No, sure, well, you have to get in the character, depending who's, you know, taking command of the story.
Right.
And so some days I'm Elwood, some days I'm Turner, and going back and forth. And sometimes I'm in my character, sometimes not. Cora, the main character of the Underground Railroad, has the least amount of me in her, which is probably why it's my most popular book. But in terms of, but with this book, you know, I sort of have my Turner days and Elwood days.
If someone's reading this book, I mean, you know, I won't lie, like when I was reading parts of it, you want to put it down, but you don't want to put it down. You want to put it down because of how it makes you feel, but then you want to keep reading it because the story is so engaging and it's gripping, and you know, you don't want to look away. It feels like you're not afraid to write stories like this. You know, some would say that you're exposing the ugly underbelly of America. Would you say you're doing it for that reason, or are you just telling stories to try and get people to think about their world differently?
I'm trying to, you know, do the right project that is appropriate for me this year. And I've written books that have a lot of jokes and books that have no jokes. I've written 2 serious books in a row, one about slavery and this one about the reform school. And if you're going to tell the story right, you have to be all in.
Right.
So it's brutal. Slavery was brutal. It's not like I'm writing Gone with the Wind, where a white lady is being self-actualized against the backdrop of slavery.
Right.
And it's like, oh, they're trying to burn my house down. It's like, they should burn your house down. You're a slaver. And then with the Nickel Boys, it's based on a true story, and I want to, if I can get 10% of what actually happened to the kids there, I've done my job. And so you're all in.
You do a lot of research for these books, but you chose not to go to the school to do your research. Why?
Yeah, I mean, the more research I can do from home on my computer and archives, the happier I am. When you leave the house, there's so many, what's the word, people, and if I can avoid human interaction, it's usually a win. But you do have to go into the field sometimes, get your real writer badge. In the case of this book, I meant to go to Florida and visit the school, and I kept putting it off, and I was halfway through the book, and I figured, oh, next month and next month. And then I realized that whenever I thought about going down there, I'd get this sort of sick feeling and this really heavy feeling. I was so invested in Elwood and Turner's story and the stories of the kids who'd been to school that I realized at some point that I would only go down there with like a bulldozer and a stick of dynamite to destroy it. It was a place of evil. A year and a half ago, Hurricane Michael actually destroyed a lot of the buildings. And if you see it now, all those structures are sort of crumbling, and that sort of inner rot is now written on its outer face. And so Mother Nature took over for justice.
If someone looks at this book and goes, Colson, I love your writing, but I don't know if I want to read a book that's about a story that is this painful, why would you say reading this book would be different to just reading the story of what actually happened in real life?
Yeah, I mean, it's not nonfiction, and I took the facts of the school and put my own characters in there. And like I said, it's a brutal story, but it's also about a journey into selfhood. 2/3 of the book takes place in the school, and a third follows Elwood, the main character, as he comes to New York and makes a life for himself. He's overcoming trauma, this catastrophic event, and that's a really important part of the story, his journey into making a coherent self and coming back from this terrible incident. And if you don't want to read it, there are bookstores, and you can buy like a book about a magical puppy who gets lost and has to find his way home.
Or you can read both. You can read the puppy one, and then you can read this, but I would recommend highly that everyone read this one because you won't learn much about the puppies. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Sure.
Phenomenal story, phenomenal writer. Really appreciate it. The Nickel Boys is available now. A powerful story by an amazing writer. Colson Whitehead, everybody.